Chapter 60. The room was quieter than usual. Talby felt as though he had stepped into a morgue rather than a briefing room. Captain Dunn stood at the table, his eyes boring into the floating model of Mira. Red and orange dots and spots covered the hollow image. Talby knew what those were, and he didn't like it. Not one bit. After docking with S&R Black, it didn't take long for Went and Murdoch to get the 3 injured Marines to the infirmary. Noble immediately went to work on them and relayed status updates to Talby. He damn near shed a tear when Noble said all 3 would make it. Kellimore's squad had only been inside Mira for several hours, but it felt as though they'd been gone for years. All that worry piling up on you made perspective difficult, and Talby still couldn't let it go. While Copenhagen refueled the SV-52, Went and Murdoch were restocking weapons and munitions. When it was time to go, they'd be ready. Except that wasn't really the problem. He walked across the threshold, entered the room, and was about to stand at parade rest when Dunn growled, "At ease, get over here." The captain hadn't broken his stare with the glowing hologram. If Talby didn't know any better, and truth be told, he didn't, Dunn's eyes were tracing a route around Mira. Perhaps he'd superimposed a block image over the hologram. He shook the thought away. He was about to find out what the captain had in mind. Best to hear it from the source, rather than spending time guessing. Talby walked to the table and stood across from the captain. He wanted to ask questions, give a status update, anything to break the awkward silence that had descended over the room like a shroud. Dunn's eyes continued flicking across the model, his expression flat and emotionless. Usually cool and decisive, Dunn looked exhausted and frazzled. The stress of this mission had etched into every line of his face, and after the Schiaparelli Rebellion and the Satellite War, Dunn's once rather boyish face was already a map of tense encounters. Before this was over, he thought Dunn would look 10 years older. The captain placed his hands on the edge of the table, bent his head slightly, and seemed to be grasping for what to say. Or maybe willing himself to say what he didn't want to. Talby didn't like either possibility, but the latter was more worrisome. "James," Dunn said at last, his eyes flicking up from the table to stare into Talby's. "We have to retrieve the beacon." Talby clenched his fists. "What about Dickerson?" Dunn sighed. "We'll go after him as soon as we get the beacon." His tired expression transformed into a gleeful mask of malevolence. "And after we destroy that hulk out there." Talby forced a grin. The captain needed him to be on board with this. He knew that, but all he wanted to do right now was kick Oakes in the ass and have him chase Dickerson's escape pod at full speed, and damn the beacon and damn the ghost ship. Getting Dickerson back, his last Marine, seemed so much more important. "Sir, do we know Dickerson's speed and trajectory?" Dunn nodded. "We do. He's headed to Pluto. Black is coordinating with Mickey to keep an eye on the pod. If there's a change in the situation, we'll know it fairly quickly." Fairly quickly. The words echoed in Talby's mind. Fairly quickly meant that new information on the pod's status would take 4 to 8 minutes, depending on where the escape pod was in its journey to Pluto. And if they were still fucking around with Mira and the beacon when something happened, they'd arrive too late to save the Marine. The captain stood to his full height, his hands at his sides. Talby felt as though Dunn had read his thoughts. "It's the best we can do, James, so put that out of your mind. Right now, I need you focused." "Aye, sir," Talby said in a dead voice. Focus. Yeah, he needed to regain that. Focus on how he was going to do anything with only 4 healthy Marines, including himself. "Please continue." Dunn blinked once before speaking. "You're going to need Went, Murdoch, and Copenhagen. You comfortable with Copenhagen as your gunner?" Talby grinned. "Aye, sir, she's damn good." "Thought so," Dunn said, returning the smile. "Then Went and Murdoch will have to perform a ride-along. I want them in rad suits in case that thing out there is too hot for our combat suits. You'll travel to the beacon. Went and Murdoch will retrieve it if you can't net it. Once you get back here, we'll load it on the sled and tow it until we're ready to destroy Mira." Not a bad idea, Talby thought. but something was off in the captain's face. The easy grin that had been on Talby's face slid away. "What's the catch, sir?" Dunn sighed again. "The catch is that we don't exactly know where the beacon is. Black has the coordinates for the skiff, but there's little to no guarantee the beacon is still attached. When it loosed that last blast, it could have melted the skiff into slag or broken free of its moorings. For all we know, it could be floating out there in the Kuiper, pointed directly at Sol and ready to blast another signal." "Shit," Talby said. He inwardly winced. "Sorry, sir." "No," Dunn said. "Shit is the right response. We can send you out there by yourself to find it, but that's going to waste more time if you can't net it. I'd rather you have the Marines aboard in case you do find it." "And if we don't?" Talby asked. "Then we and the rest of humanity are truly fucked." Chapter 61. Once Noble had left the room, Kelly and her squad, well, what remained of it, continued speaking to one another in quiet voices. Karb had concussion symptoms, but they were mild. Although she wanted to sleep for 5 days, she could probably get back in a combat suit if it came to it. Kelly envied her. Elliot was done. His combat days were over for the time being. Between the blood loss, the shock exposure to vacuum and near absolute zero temperatures, not to mention his missing hand, Elliot was not leaving his bed. Probably not until they returned to Trident Station. Assuming that happens, she thought. So with Elliot out, that left her and Dickerson. Dickerson was somewhere out there, his escape pod expending its fuel to accelerate him to Pluto. Until S&R Black caught up to the pod and attempted a rescue, there was no way to tell if he was alive or dead. She tried to push that worry away again. It wasn't going to help her focus on whatever Talby or Dunn had in mind for the mission, and it sure as hell wasn't going to fix her broken ribs or remove the aches from her tortured muscles and bones. And let's not forget her own concussion. "You'll lie if you have to," she told herself. "If they need another body, you'll get in that void damn suit and be a Marine." She clenched her fists. They'd have to let her. "At ease," a tired voice said from the threshold. The 3 Marines swung their eyes to regard the speaker. Lieutenant Talby walked into the room, back straight, every ounce of his body propped up into his typical command posture. But damn, he looked tired. A relieved grin lit his face. "Thank you, all of you, for what you did aboard Mira. You have no idea how much you helped us. I'm damned glad to have the 3 of you in my command, and even happier all 3 of you are here and safe." No one said a word. The grin faded slightly, and Talby's face hardened. "Carbonaro, Calimura, you 2 are on deck. I want you in your combat suits and ready to head to the cargo bay in 10 minutes. Noble's setting up some goodies for you down there to help speed your recovery." "Aye, sir," both she and Karb replied. "I don't think we'll need you, but you're the last 2 combat Marines I have available, apart from the captain." He noticed the smart-assed grin on Karb's face. "Yes, Lance Corporal, you 2 are the last meat sticks I have available." Karb chuckled. "Sorry, sir." He waved the comment away and pointed at Elliot. "Your job, Marine, is to rest. Black will be debriefing you shortly. I suggest block to block so you don't have to talk." "Aye, sir," Elliot said in a husky voice. "Questions?" Talby asked. "Yes, sir," Calimura said. "What's the plan?" He smiled. "Black will transmit the mission briefing momentarily. Just get ready." He knocked a fist on the bulkhead. "Understood?" "Aye, sir," Kelly and Karb said in loud voices. Elliot may have responded too, but she didn't hear his voice. "Good to have you home." With that, Talby retreated from the infirmary, the dull clump of his footsteps receding until they disappeared. Kelly looked at Karb. "You ready for this?" "Aye, Corporal," she said. Her eyes hardened. "Whatever we have to do to get the fuck out of here so we can rescue Dickerson." Kelly grinned like a shark. "Glad to see we're on the same page." After walking, limping, from the infirmary to her locker, Kelly removed her sweat-drenched panties and tossed them into the recycler. If she'd had time for a shower, it would have been more than welcome. Just the thought of warm water spraying down on her tired flesh, steam lapping at her tired eyes, made her giddy. She glanced at the shower stalls with longing as she quickly dressed into a clean jumpsuit. Someone had left her mag boots next to her locker. She grinned as she wondered whether it was Noble or one of the nom-rates. A few lockers down, Carb was already stepping into her own boots. "Hey, boss," she called. "I want a shower when all this is over." "Tell you what," Kelly said. "You and I have dibs the moment we get back." "Copy that," Carb said. As soon as the pair had finished dressing, Carb followed Kelly into the hallway. They walked in silence to the cargo bay, unspoken concern in their body language, their minds flooded with the same worries. Dickerson was still out there. The beacon was still out there. And instead of actively assisting in getting the beacon aboard so they could chase after their squad mate, she and Carb were benched, and Talby would only put them into service if there were no other option. Kelly understood the reasoning, but that didn't mean she had to like it. Talby and the captain were making sound, tactical, strategic decisions, but it still burned her ass. If only we'd gotten back sooner, she thought. If only. Black connected to her and relayed notes regarding the beacon. Gunny's squad had retrieved it, sure, but at great cost. The skiff was no doubt destroyed, and Gunny might never wake up again. And if he did, he might never be able to speak. The beacon had cost them a lot. Hell, this mission had cost them. Elliot was missing a hand, like and Nero were both dead. Dickerson was still missing. They were down 2 skiffs, and, except for Talby, Dunn, and Oakes, the remaining Marines had all suffered injuries of one form or another. The cargo bay hatch was open, revealing the SV-52 sitting at the far end, Copenhagen standing beside it. Wint and Murdoch had ditched their combat suits for the heavy rad suits engineers wore in case of a reactor leak. The garments could withstand much more radiation exposure than the standard issue SFMC combat suit. The sight gave her pause. The beacon, it seemed, was even more dangerous than she'd first considered. Not only had it called these strange creatures to hitch a ride on the derelict heading back to Sol System, but it could attract other life forms already inhabiting the Kuiper Belt. If they didn't retrieve it and stop it, what would it do next? Call even more alien life forms? Or alert its creators that it had found a new home? She shivered at the thought, but it was clear the exosolar life forms they'd seen so far didn't create the beacon. Unless she was very wrong, the creatures they'd encountered didn't have the means nor intelligence to do that. So who did? Who isn't the question, she told herself. What is the proper question? Somewhere out there in the black of deep space, perhaps dozens or hundreds of light years away, an unknown life form had created the beacon and ejected it into the galaxy like a message in a bottle. Only the message was dangerous. Unbelievably dangerous. If Black was right, these creatures fed on photons, at least in part. Which meant the closer they came to Sol's light, the more they might breed, travel, and eat. And from what she'd seen thus far, the creatures certainly had a penchant for destroying other life forms. If they made it to Sol System's interior, what would happen? Would they attack the fledgling colonies at Iapetus, Titan? What would they do when they found thousands of human sentients, rather than a few measly morsels aboard a floating hulk? She didn't know, and not knowing terrified her. How long before the beacon's creators decided to show up? Decades? Centuries? Or minutes? And would humankind be capable of putting up a fight? She doubted it. The technology to create the beacon had certainly seemed well beyond their grasp. Even Black was flummoxed as to how it worked. However, what it was doing, what they thought it was doing, was clear enough. It was bringing a horde of nasties into humanity's space. That alone was reason enough to be concerned. Now they were going to retrieve it, put it on a sled, and send it to Pluto. Was that really the right move? She didn't know. The captain probably didn't know. But what else could they do? Unfortunately, she doubted they'd know that answer until they had the beacon. Maybe not even then. But destroying Mira, removing it from the equation, might give them some idea. Or maybe not. With all these thoughts and questions spinning inside her head, it was difficult to focus when Talby finally appeared, his flight helmet in his hands. He yelled, "At ease!" before anyone had a chance to reach parade rest. "You've all seen the briefing?" Their voices shouted as one. "Aye, sir." "Good. Any questions?" The Marines fell silent. Talby waited another beat before speaking. "Be ready to move like lightning. I don't know what we're facing, so be prepared to go off script." Went chuckled and quickly recovered his composure. Talby shot him a look, but it was one of weary amusement rather than reproach. "Carbonaro and Calimora, I want you at the airlock ready to jump out and offer assistance should we need it." "Aye, sir." "Let's go," Talby said, and approached the SV-52 with brisk steps. Kelly glanced at Carb. "Locked and loaded?" Her squad mate pointed at the rifle rack in front of them. "Just have to MacLock those and we're good to go." "Outstanding," Kelly said, and put on her helmet. Carb did the same. She activated the squad channel. "Load up." "Hi, boss," Carb said. Kelly heard a grin in her voice.